When we're talking about sod versus seed, what are the advantages and disadvantages? These are my turf grass demonstration plots. About a month ago, we established this grass from sod. We got instant grass in the first day. Seed, still not filled in completely. I mean, it's coming up and it's gonna take over eventually, but it's gonna take a much longer time. One of the problems is that you get weeds that come in. Having established sod greatly prevents weeds. When I have seed, I get whatever weeds are there, they're gonna come through. I can see a lot of mallow here and some spurge and some grass weeds. The grass weeds are particularly a problem because they're hard to take out of grass. You have to kind of kill the other grass to kill it. Most of these broadleaf weeds, not such a big deal. I can spray an herbicide and take them out. So in addition to the advantage of having instant grass, the other thing that's nice about sod is that because you have instant grass, you have reduced erosion potential. And that can be a really important thing, especially on slopes. Not everything's all rosy, and never is. The disadvantage of sod is usually cost. Most of the time, it's 2 or 3 times more cost to do sod versus seed, depending on seed prices and sod prices, of course. Another disadvantage with sod is that it's not really conducive for bunch type grasses. So typically the fescues and the ryegrasses are typically a bunch grass and they don't just hold together really well. The other grasses that have stolons and rhizomes, they kind of knit themselves together, and so they're a better sod. You can put a netting on the back of the sod that helps hold those together, but that adds additional costs and hassle. All right, so I'm a soil scientist and we're weirdos, but the fact is, if you want healthy plants, you better pay attention to your soil. We talk about that in another video in terms of how to prep for seeding or sodding. Here's a list as well, and you can refer to this to help guide you. Once that's all ready and you're ready for sod, you need to choose which kind of sod you're going to get. If you have a big project, you may want to buy these large rolls. Most people are doing small projects, get these rectangular sheets or small rolls. You also want to think about thin cut versus thick cut. The only time we use thick cut is if I need to be able to do something on it right away, like I'm going to play the Super Bowl. Then I need thick cut sod so I can play on it in just a couple of weeks. Most of the time though, we want thin cut sod. It's about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. It actually forces the roots to get out of that soil and grow down into the existing soil, and so it establishes better if we have thin cut sod. It's also really important to make sure that your soil type is similar in your sod as what you're laying it on. If you have, for example, really clay soil that's in the sod and you're laying it on top of sandy soil, that's going to be a problem. Or if you have high organic matter versus low organic matter, the soils don't have to match up perfectly, but they need to be at least close. Most of the time, if we have a loam, and we're laying it on top of, something that's close in soil texture, then we're okay. It's also really critical to know when the sod was cut, how it was transported and stored. If it was sitting on a truck, heating up, or it's just been sitting around for a long time, it can negatively affect it. You can get internal heating, you can get desiccation on the edges, and you have to pay attention to those things or you're going to have a problem. Now, frankly, a lot of the time, even if we have some problems, like you can see here in these pictures with some sod that got a little bit too warm, it was being transported from California for this football field. We had a little bit of damage. The sod kind of went into dormancy, but it didn't kill it. It came out of it and looked great a couple weeks later. So it's important to make sure that it happens. Some people think they want to water their sod, and when it's in a stack on the pallet, it's typically not a good idea, even though we are concerned about desiccation. Most importantly, just get it down and try not to let it get too hot, and you should be okay. If you do get some edges that are really desiccated, you can even cut that off if you have to. All right, so what happened with these rectangles of sod? Some of them look great, some of them not so great. And the difference was age. The rectangles that are not doing very well were cut several days before the sod that's looking good, and the rectangles that was cut that same day. Once everything's ready and you're going to lay the sod, you need to wet the soil down a little bit. It's really critical to have tight seams. You can see these guys using rakes to pull the sod over so that there's no gap. We also need precise end cuts. You can see here that they're using a half moon shovel to cut the ends, and essentially you're cutting the end of each piece of sod, taking off about an inch or so of each. And when you do that, you just take each end off, throw it away, and then you have a very precise cut that fits together nicely with no gap. When you're laying sod, it's important to not have the ends meet up. You want to stagger each piece of sod so that you don't have an odd looking line across the grass. It can cause some failures. Also, if you're on a slope, you want to lay it properly, as you can see in this picture here. So the next question is once you got this luscious sod that's established, how do you take care of it? The most important thing is right afterwards to keep it watered, because you got to water sometimes more than once a day to make sure that those roots don't dry out and that they get established. After that, you're looking at usually 2 or 3 weeks before you start mowing. And as soon as you start mowing, it's okay to go ahead and apply fertilizers and pesticides that you may need to be able to keep your grass healthy.